Hello, and welcome to our Juneteenth celebration. Like many Americans, I wasn't raised with an awareness of Juneteenth, but that's not surprising since even some of the most basic aspects of our country's racial history has at times been hidden from us. Take, for example, the way that I, as well as hundreds, maybe even thousands of children, first learned about the Civil War in my elementary school, a version of history that I would call miseducational. The teacher depicted both sides as valiant and honorable. But what about slavery? I thought. How could we be having any kind of lesson about honor on both sides when one side would have allowed my family to be enslaved? As the teacher gave this lesson, none of what they said made sense. And over time, a skeptical voice kept asking, is this really true? I can only wonder how this lesson impacted my classmates who actually did believe that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. Not unlike this lesson, many Americans learned that President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of September 1862 finally freed enslaved people. In fact, the Emancipation only freed enslaved people in the Union. Thus, this is a narrative that conceals the stories of the 100,000 enslaved people who freed themselves in the decades before the Civil War. It's a narrative that covers up the many hundreds of thousands of enslaved people in the Confederate States who broke their own chains and took their freedom. It's a narrative that clouds the blatant desperation of a planter class that hid the truth of freedom from enslaved people in Texas for months after the Confederate surrender. And it's a narrative that loses sight of the glorious day when emancipation finally came for all. Indeed, the horrors of redemption, the disaster of Jim Crow, the devastation of the Depression, and the immensity of the world wars dulled our remembrance of that Jubilee Day and robbed us of important understandings of ourselves as a people and a nation. But the memory of that day held on, celebrated in scattered communities across the nation, and now it is in resurgence, with Congress voting to establish Juneteenth as a federal holiday just this week. So I'm proud that we are gathered here in this moment as one of the world's top institutions of higher learning, remembering that momentous day of liberation, understanding our history as a people, and looking forward to a future where our excellence as a university will be defined in no small part by our commitment to diversity. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Carol Folt, the 12th president of USC. She is an accomplished academic leader, life scientist, and teacher, and holds faculty appointments in marine and environmental biology, civil and environmental engineering, and preventive medicine. Dr. Folt is known for her student-centric approach and for emphasizing academic excellence and innovation. She is setting an ambitious course for USC, especially in the areas of shared governance and sustainability. Before joining USC, Dr. Folt led the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Prior to that, she served as provost and interim president at Dartmouth College. Please join me in welcoming President Folt.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you, Chris. From the moment that you arrived at USC, you have been reaching out to every school, department, and every group at USC, and we can see your commitment and your ability to bring people together. You have our gratitude. I also want to thank everyone who is joining us today for USC's Juneteenth celebration commemoration. And I want to thank all the amazing speakers who are going to be contributing to our event today. Each one of you strengthens our Trojan community by listening, by learning, by sharing. We've come together today to celebrate and to remember Juneteenth. This, of course, is the day in 1865 when people living in the last holdout, Texas, officially were made aware that the war was over, that the Union had held, and the state's 250,000 enslaved blacks were free. It came 2 months after General Lee had surrendered and 2.5 years after Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. 1 year ago, we came together in the same way to celebrate freedom and feel some joy in the strength of generations on last year's Juneteenth. but it was taking place against a backdrop of pain and protest. Since then, we've seen signs of progress across our nation. In Minneapolis, a jury convicted Derek Chauvin in George Floyd's death. Kamala Harris became Vice President of the United States. And the Black Lives Matter movement continues its uniquely American journey, pulling the past into the light so that we might achieve justice. Reflecting on our history's truth is key. We've had reminders, though, that it can be a long road to the truth. On Memorial Day, we marked the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Tulsa's thriving Black community was destroyed during what survivors said was 18 hours of terror. For years, it was called a race riot, until historians showed that it was actually an attack on race, the result of false rumors. This reminds us truth is persistent. We see this in the 1619 Project. The New York Times launched this initiative on the 400th anniversary of the beginning of American slavery. This project zeroes in on how slavery truly has shaped America and pays tribute to the enormous contributions by Black Americans to our nation. The 1619 Project has inspired our own faculty and students. Beginning last August, for example, student composers, writers, choreographers, and filmmakers have teamed up to chronicle the African diaspora. Thornton professor Ron McCurdy came up with the idea for this 7-part series, and then he put it in the hands of our students from Thornton, Kaufman, Cinematic Arts, and Annenberg. At USC, we've long paid tribute to Juneteenth. USC's Black Staff and Faculty Caucus has hosted Come One, Come All celebrations every year since at least 1994, and today's celebration builds on that history. It also reminds me of a recent chat that I had with alumna Channing Godfrey Peoples, who wrote and directed the award-winning film Miss Juneteenth. Growing up Black in Texas, Channing told me, Juneteenth is the fabric of my life. So one of the themes she said she examined was what happens when freedom comes too late. In her own life, she said, I just knew I had to keep moving forward. Moving forward comes down to this. Black history is American history. As Americans, we need to own it, to understand it, and to never let it be silenced. And Black history at USC is being made every day. It's a history all Trojans share, and it takes dedication by all of us to keep that history alive. So let's celebrate Juneteenth together. And now, with the passage of making Juneteenth a federal holiday, we too will be commemorating it and celebrating it as a holiday for years to come. Let's fight on together.
Greetings. I'm Ange-Marie Hancock Alfaro, Dean's Professor and Chair of the Department of Political Science and International Relations here at USC Dornsife. Now, here in California, the COVID-19 pandemic has been going on for 504 days. If you think this has been unbearably hard, and most of us do, think about what it means or how it would feel to be enslaved in Galveston, Texas, and living through 535 extra days before hearing the news that you are now legally free. 535 extra days is what it took for enslaved Black people in Galveston, Texas, to learn that the Emancipation Proclamation issued by President Abraham Lincoln had set them free from their bonds. Juneteenth reminds us of the difficult truth that there has been a long-standing difference in our country between what is said on paper and what happens in reality. Today, we often think that it's much easier for us to know the difference between what our founding documents say and what happens in reality because we have these. But Juneteenth remains important because despite having phones, computers, and tablets, we are sobered by the reminder that we have further to go as we close the gap between what's on paper and the reality that we experience. Juneteenth got us closer in the 19th century. In 1963, the March on Washington got us closer as well. What will get us closer today, in the waning days of a pandemic, amidst movements for racial justice? 535 days from today, will we be as a country closer to embodying Dr. King's words, asking America to live up to what it wrote on paper? Moreover, how will you be part of the solution? Juneteenth is now on its way to becoming a federal holiday, and it is the closest example I can think of the words, "None of us can be free until all of us are free." Can we rest until what we say on paper lines up with what we do in reality? Juneteenth reminds us of what we should strive for to ensure that in our country and in our world, freedom is at last accessible to all. No papers required.
Greetings to all and happy Juneteenth. My name is Cynthia Bratz, and I'm president of the USC's Black Staff and Faculty Caucus, an organization that has been around for over 40 years here at USC. We are a group of hardworking Black staff and faculty who are dedicated to the continued sponsorship of student scholarships. We do this in monthly payroll deductions from our staff and faculty caucus members. We are an organization that has raised the money ourselves for scholarships and are proud sponsors of programs such as the annual Dr. King celebration, of which we celebrated the 40th year this January of 2021, along with the Juneteenth celebrations, annual scholarship donations with Black Alumni Association, annual assistance with USC Black Graduation, now known as African American Cultural Celebration, and other programs and projects. We have been celebrating Juneteenth here at USC for over 20 years, with our first celebration taking place in 1994. Not only have we celebrated this day for over 20 years, but we have also tied it into honoring men, young and old, who had been taken away from their families or killed during slavery, as this day, Father's Day, falls in along with the Juneteenth celebration time. As an organization, we sought out to hold this celebration to enlighten people about the history of this day. Juneteenth was established on Freedom's Eve, or the eve of January 1st, 1863, when enslaved and free African Americans gathered in churches and private homes across the country awaiting news that the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect. At the stroke of midnight, prayers were answered. Enslaved people in Confederate states were declared legally free, but not everyone in Confederate territory was immediately free. Although the Emancipation Proclamation was made effective in 1863, it could not be implemented in those areas still under Confederate control. As a result of this, in the westernmost Confederate state of Texas, enslaved people could not be free until 2 years later. Freedom finally came June 19, 1865, when some 2,000 Union troops arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas. The Army announced that more than 250,000 enslaved Black people in the state were free. Executive order, decree. This day became known as Juneteenth by the newly freed people in Texas. One of the most memorable Juneteenth celebrations that the Black Staff and Faculty Caucus had was the attendance of the Tuskegee Airmen. Learning about these men and what they did and all that they went through was awesome. Our young and seasoned attendees at the celebration were overjoyed with meeting these men. After many celebrations of Juneteenth on campus, we decided to take a group of family, friends, and caucus members. I believe it was in 2015 that we took a trip to a town founded by Colonel Allen Allensworth, who was born into slavery in Louisville, Kentucky in 1842. Colonel Allen Allensworth joined the Navy, and when he was discharged, he had achieved the rank of first class petty officer. It was in 1908, I believe, between June and August, that Colonel Allensworth and 4 other men, or settlers as they were called, with similar visions, decided to establish a place where African Americans, Black people, could live and thrive without oppression, established a town founded, financed, and governed by African Americans here in California. They formed the California Colony Home Promoting Association. They selected Tulare County, Earlemont, California, because it was fertile, there was plenty of water, the land was available and inexpensive. The town grew rapidly with more than 200 residents by 1914. The same year, Allensworth became a voting precinct and jurisdictional district. However, Colonel Allensworth was killed on September 14, 1914, when he was hit by a motorcycle while getting off a streetcar in Monrovia. The townspeople all believe it was deliberate. Not only was this thriving town, but some folks didn't want the town to flourish and began to cause problems for the townspeople. By the 1940s, most of the residents and migratory farm workers and population was mainly a mixture of Blacks and Hispanics. In 1970, a drive began to save the town of Allensworth. Allensworth would be historic monument and public park dedicated in the memory and spirit of Colonel Allensworth, as well as a place to note the achievements and contributions of African Americans in the history of development of California. I encourage everyone to take a trip to see this town and just imagine how lively it was back in the early 1900s. The caucus is very happy that the entire university now too celebrates Juneteenth. It is a very important part of American history and our history. To each and every one of you, please be safe and peace and blessings to all. Happy Juneteenth.
Hello, my name is Dr. Julie Rousseau, adjunct professor, as well as chair of USC Athletics Black Lives Matter Action Team. Over the past year, particularly following the murder of George Floyd, many of our Black student athletes and allies used their voices to improve the Black experience at USC. A group of 35 students created the United Black Student Athlete Association and presented 12 recommendations they thought would make their experience better. As we celebrate the emancipation of Black America from enslavement this Juneteenth, we also celebrate our student athletes who utilize their freedom and raise their collective voices to make Trojan Athletics a better department for all. Representing Trojan Athletics today, we have Desiree Caldwell, Eric Allen, and Belle Rowley.
Juneteenth is a holiday that represents when the last slaves in Texas finally found out they were free. Juneteenth is now a celebration, but it also represents an injustice that occurred where slaves were freed 2 years after when they should have been. Juneteenth should influence us to use our voices now more than ever to ensure that the events of our history do not become part of our future.
Hi, my name is Eric Allen. Juneteenth is a day to reflect on how far African Americans have come since June 19, 1865. Our ancestors risked their lives so that we can prosper in the present day. Although monumental strides have been made towards equality, we have so much more to accomplish. Juneteenth is a motivation and a reminder to get off the couch and use your voice to promote change in this country. The events in the last calendar year are prime examples of how powerful our voices are and how powerful we can be. We elected a new president, and we shook up the status quo in the judicial system in the Derek Chauvin trial. But we cannot stop here. It is vital that we continue to lead in our communities and encourage new leaders to be agents of change and justice.
Hi, my name is Belle Raleigh, and I'm a member of the USC women's soccer team. The importance of Juneteenth is no secret, but for me, as the years go by, its significance grows greater by the year. When the Emancipation Proclamation came to fruition, many remained enslaved, and I realized when I was old enough to understand, June 19th was in fact the day that slaves were freed in Confederate states. However, in my short lifetime, I've figured out the African American community has never been freed. The shackles were replaced with a system designed to suffocate a whole race of people. Whether it's mass incarceration, police brutality, lack of opportunity, and while the list is quite endless, I think the real jubilee will come when the color of one's skin is no longer seen as a weapon. But we all know change does not happen overnight. So on Juneteenth, I celebrate the strides made each year. The people who came before me, the people I'm with, and the people who come after me. Because on a day like today, I realize there is hope for change. It also allows me to reflect on the impact I have made in the small portion of people in my life, and to think about the bigger picture. The bigger picture is often provided to us as an idea that something smaller can lead to something greater in the end. And that is just how I feel about this. This past year, my Black teammates and I have started conversations within our team surrounding the influence that George Floyd's death had on the Black community, and that it was symbolic of years and years of oppression, not just one single incident. In my eyes, changing the opinion of one person can lead to the way they interact with the next, the person after that, and eventually change a whole society for the bigger picture. But on a day like today, more importantly, I celebrate hope, excellence, strength, and the power of so many. I'm beyond blessed with the opportunities I have been afforded, and grateful to see that having a voice is the greatest gift of them all. Thank you.
Although much work still lies ahead to make our department more diverse, equitable, and inclusive, I do believe we all benefited from the efforts of our United Black Student Athletes, just as America has benefited from the contributions of the Black community. Happy Juneteenth, 2021. Fight on.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Pearson. And more importantly, happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth, National Independence Day to all Americans. It's never too late to do the right thing. Great nations don't ignore their most painful moments, and great institutions know how to acknowledge these moments. Let the greatness of the University of Southern California shine through as we recognize and celebrate the liberation of the last state-sponsored American slave. And may we also bring an end to systems of forced servitude today. May the world learn from the moral stain and the terrible toll that slavery took on the country and continues to take. What President Biden has long called America's original sin, slavery. I never thought I would ever hear an American president speak reconciliation to fruition. Feel free to call it pessimism, but in my most objective self, I never thought I'd see the day we, the people, would celebrate the symbolic end of slavery. No words sweeter than those brought by the force of the United States Army and authored by Major General Granger. The people are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Let that marinate. On June 19th, 1865, 2 years, 6 months, and 18 days after the Emancipation Proclamation, the United States government sent the United States Army, led by a major general, to inform the people and despots of Texas that all slaves are free. It's never too late to do the right thing. 99 years to the day, on June 19th, 1964, after a 54-day filibuster, the United States Senate passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There is something very special about this day. Juneteenth has been a special day for many of us, and for many of us, no longer is this an underground holiday in the Black community. No longer will there be the necessity to explain the history of Juneteenth. No longer will Juneteenth be relegated to backyard barbecues at the Conscious Sisters' house. All Americans can enjoy what we've been doing for years, arriving late at a friend's house and somebody's uncle asking you to bring him something to drink because he can't leave the grill unattended. Some old timers constantly telling you bid whiz, a superior game of spades, and then you realize the game is called bid whist, not bid whiz. Notwithstanding, they end up playing spades with you. The DJ plays Marvin Gaye, Gotta Give It Up, and then it begins. The Soul Train line, the electric slide, the cha-cha slide, the wobble, and I'm anticipating this year some TikTok Juneteenth Jerusalemas. And at the end of every night, there's a group of older, libated relatives that somehow start forcing kids to show off their talents. And then it happens, that voice, it sounds like a young Whitney, a young Luther. And those libated relatives are brought to tears by the best rendition of Lift Every Voice. Friends and relatives who haven't talked in years somehow find a way, because it's never too late to do the right thing. So, in the spirit of celebration and reconciliation, I would be more than remiss, I would be derelict in my duties if I didn't plant a seed for thought and ideas suited for positive, affirmative revolution. Let's reconsider reparations. Let's consider environmental factors that contribute to the disproportionate, inequitable social and educational outcomes that many descendants of slaves face today. Let's consider value. Let's calculate the impact of slave labor on the development of a young nation. Let's establish a scale for a life of slavery. Let's analyze hegemony and systems of oppression. Let's stop making excuses. 40 acres of a mule wasn't sufficient then, and only the product and process of real reconciliation can truly set this country free. It's never too late to do the right thing. The right thing is USC celebrating Juneteenth university-wide. The right thing is recognizing Juneteenth as a federal holiday. The right thing is every city, every village, every county, district, state, every person, every institution celebrates Juneteenth every June 19th as a reminder that if one person is not free, none of us are truly free. So, happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth National Independence Day. Peace and blessings. Yo, yo! And fight on.
Hi, my name is Johnny Walker, president of the Veterans Association here at USC. From 1861 to 1865, we fought the bloodiest war in our nation's history against ourselves, to free our nation from the grave tyranny of slavery. On June 19th, 1865, our nation took its greatest leap forward towards liberty since its founding by delivering freedom to every last slave in the United States. While sometimes it may not sound, look, or feel like it, we've come a long way since then. That bloody war restored our freedom. The great civil rights campaigns of the 20th century delivered racial equality before the law. Today, though we face growing racial tensions, the fact remains that I have opportunities my ancestors never had dreamed of. I proudly served our armed forces, learning skills and building camaraderie with the men and women of our military that knew no bounds like class or race. Through my own hard work and determination, I was able to earn a position at this school, one of our nation's most celebrated educational institutions. I'm honored to lead the USC Veterans Association, and I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to speak today and hear from so many of the leading thinkers of our age. One topic that I've been thinking about that we've all heard our leaders speak about in the recent weeks is the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Ride. But the story I keep hearing isn't the story I understand. To be fair, I don't think the people have really learned a lesson of what happened. So bear with me as we dive into a little bit of history. For those of you who don't know, the Tulsa Race Ride took place in the middle of 1921. A mob of white residents, some armed and deputized by the city, systematically burned down 35 blocks of a thriving Black community in Tulsa's Greenwood District. So successful was the Greenwood District that it was known as Black Wall Street. But it wasn't always that way. You can probably guess that the land left for the Black community in Tulsa wasn't the best in town. And the people of Greenwood certainly didn't get any help from the city. But in spite of every obstacle to their success, from the discrimination to neglect to the little area north of the railroad tracks, once called Little Africa, grew into a prosperous community. So what led to the massacre we called the Tulsa Race Ride? It was the usual human suspects: anger, racial tribalism, and jealousy. As the people of Greenwood achieved astounding success just 2 generations after emancipation, many of the white residents in the surrounding Tulsa had been left behind. They didn't like seeing people who started off worse than they did reach success in the revolutionary new oil industry when they were left tending fields. So they burned it down, all 35 blocks, beating or killing anyone who got in their way. When I hear about our leaders talk about the Tulsa Race Ride, I'm saddened because I still see that they don't get it. They used the Tulsa Race Ride to stoke the same resentment and racial tribalism that led to the catastrophic tragedy in the first place. They tried to keep dividing our nation on the basis of race. While I am Black, that is only a small part of who I am. I am an American. When I joined our military, I didn't join to fight for Black America. I joined to defend all Americans, regardless of class, creed, or color. Although our experiences as Americans are different on the basis of our cultural backgrounds, we are one people, one nation, and we cannot forget that. We cannot give into the resentment, jealousy, and tribalism. So as you celebrate Juneteenth, as we reflect on Tulsa, I want you to remember the blood we shed to deliver freedom for all, and the united country our men and women in uniform have fought to preserve. We are one nation and one people. Have hope, because the worst is already behind us. Thank you.
Greetings. I'm Renee Smith Maddox, clinical professor from the Suzanne DeWarrick Peck School of Social Work. Juneteenth represents one of the most historic events in American history, the official recognition of the end of slavery in the United States. Juneteenth not only commemorates this revolutionary moment, but reminds us to take time to celebrate the achievements, progress, and collective power of Black people, their culture, and communities. It captures the essence of an American ideal: freedom and justice for all. Juneteenth is a celebration of emancipation for the Black community. It reminds us to recognize enslavement and freedom. It includes cycles of pain and joy, living side by side. It's an acknowledgement of the humanity and the resilience of Black people and the societal perils many of them have to negotiate. We are also reminded to keep talking about freedom, liberty, justice, and what it takes to get it and preserve it. The idea of freedom is inspiring and should have a global effect. However, the road to freedom is difficult. We have been reminded by many that freedom is a constant struggle. It has been said by various people in various ways, none of us are free until all of us are free. So spread the word that celebrating Juneteenth 2021 is a practice of freedom. It is a recognition of our ever-expanding awareness of freedom. And this year, we can renew our commitment to liberty and justice for all by clarifying our intentions. It's up to us to demonstrate it and to live it. As human beings, it's our responsibility to take care of one another, remember the truth of our history, and determine how we will create a more just, inclusive, and equitable world. This is our clarion call for freedom. May we fight on together. Peace and many blessings.
Hey USC family, my name is Mahogany Borrayo Gilchrist, and I'm a doctoral student from Rossier School of Education. And welcome to the 2021 Juneteenth celebration. Today commemorates the day my ancestors were freed from their physical shackles, and a reminder to me to live unapologetically Black and freely. Though we are still fighting for racial justice and combating anti-Black policies and structures, I challenge you, my USC family, to celebrate with me and my Black American community by researching Juneteenth, celebrating Black joy, and beginning the process of becoming a co-conspirator with the Black community to dismantle oppressive structures, policies, and laws. Today, we celebrate the beauty of being Black, free, and of all magical. Happy Juneteenth, family, and fight on.
Juneteenth for me is a day of reflection and celebration. It commemorates the day when African Americans who were enslaved in Texas finally found out that they had been freed, 2 years after their official freedom was granted through the Emancipation Proclamation. For me, this is a time to celebrate, to give thanks to my ancestors and the people who came before me, who have passed down traditions and created lineages that are still here today. It is also a time to reflect on the nation's history, on where we have come from and how far we still have to go. While it has been a step in the right direction to declare Juneteenth as a federal holiday, it only makes me think, what more can be done? For this, I hope that all my Black people are able to celebrate, have fun, and just reflect on all that we have been through as a people and how we have always persevered and overcome any obstacles in our way.
Hello, I'm so glad to be with you today as we commemorate a moment from June 19, 1865, when in Texas, an order was read announcing that all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between masters and slaves, the order said. This marked what was supposed to be the end of one of the darkest times in our nation's history. And while light dawned on the day, a shadow remains, albeit one that changes over time. At times, that shadow is long, absorbing all the light, a feeling I think many may associate with as despair, and what we felt leading into this time last year, remember? At other times, the shadow is short, letting more light in, but it's still there, still reminding us of our dark past, and that even though we've come so far, we still have a long distance to go to achieve the equality we are all striving for. But today, June 19th, is the day we celebrate the end of slavery, and we do this proudly, even as we know slavery remained legal and practiced in some states well after that order in 1865. And even though we know today, some 156 years later, the offspring of enslaved people continue to experience inequalities of personal rights and rights of property. You know, when I think about celebrations, I think about the coming together of people, just as we are doing today as diverse members of the USC community, to acknowledge, honor, mark, observe, remember, salute, even toast. You know, this idea of togetherness, what we can do together, reminds me of the wisdom of Amanda Gorman. And as we close out this year's USC Juneteenth celebration, I want to share her words that I believe serve as a salute for this celebration. From her poem, We the People, Gorman starts by saying, "We the people live in a less than perfect union that accuses the vulnerable and never the top class and race." Then she goes on to suggest what we can do now to right the wrongs, and it applies to this celebration and beyond. She says, "We the people are brave enough to love this country's creed. We the people love this country enough to question its misdeeds. We the people question enough to build upon this foundation. We the people erect an improved hilltop of a nation. Indivisible by where we come from or who we are born, we the people are those who let freedom sing. So no matter who or how we love, talk, pray, or mourn, this America, too, is ours to build and ours to sing." So by continuing to come together to celebrate the richness of our similarities and our differences, to reflect on and push each other to find ways to eradicate the systemic challenges that face us, and to fight for racial equality, we can create a world in which the shadows of the past stay short and shorter, always serving as a reminder that is surrounded by the light of positive, enduring change we have worked and are working so hard to drive. I'd like to thank all of today's speakers and talented artists. I'd also like to thank each of you for taking the time to join us this Saturday to commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth. I hope that you leave this event with your hearts lifted, having had the opportunity to reflect and to celebrate. Please have a safe and wonderful weekend. Take care, be well, and fight on.